Good evening. How is everyone? Hope you are doing well, making sure that this is getting started with the recording. Welcome to our very first Mav Essentials Live for the spring semester. We are excited to have all of you here, part of the financial aid session that we have this evening. Some important topics because of that academic and financial aid planning that we need to have that discussion. So hopefully you will find this information available and very interesting. So my name is Kelsey Bratcher, and I'm the Assistant Director of Parent and Family Services. New here to UTA and from August. So if I haven't met you yet, if you haven't attended, welcome and thanks for joining me this evening. Very excited to be here as part of UTA and work with our families. Very important part of our student success. We also have Miss Tasha here. I'm sure y'all know her. So Tasha, you want to say hello this evening? Rookie.
Second time today, my goodness. Uh, I always say, Kelsey catches me. I always say whenever I forget to turn off my mute button, rookie move. We've been doing this for 2 years now, you would think. Well, I'm Tasha Talton. I am the Director of Transition Programs and Services, which houses our transfer student population, first generation college students, off campus Mavericks, um, parents and family members, as well as our students who identify as being parents of their own, as well as students who identify as being part of the foster care system. So we have a really large department, but we absolutely love working with our families. You have a very special place in my heart. And this Mav Essentials Live is important to us. So I'm going to kick it off to Kelsey. I know you guys are going to be in great hands with Kelsey and Jonathan today. I will see you all around. Hopefully, we'll get some great questions in the chat that I can help assist with if needed.
Thanks, Tasha. Well, I wanted to share a few things about Mav Essentials Live and our parent family services before we get started on our event today. So bear with me. Here's some information important to you and hopefully very helpful. That we wanted to make sure that we have the Mav Essentials Live program. Of course, it started a couple of years ago when we had this little thing called a pandemic startup, and we needed to be able to communicate with our parents and families and our students. So we were doing a lot of online virtual programs. And we wanted to continue that because we saw that our family members from wherever they were able to connect with us and that we were able to provide a service for them no matter where you were. So if you are able to find the chat and let me know where you're tuning in from, whether it's here in Arlington, if it's in Houston, if it's in some other state, go ahead if you are able to find the chat and let me know where you're tuning in from. So we want to continue to do Mav Essentials Live each month to provide the opportunity for our families to learn new resources and develop those resources and connections with our staff and those here at UTA. So again, we hope that you get the most out of this session. This one is Financial Aid 101, and you'll learn some great stuff from Jonathan here in a little bit. So hopefully you are able to connect with each other and learn more about Financial Aid 101. I'm not sure if this is your first time using Microsoft Teams, so I wanted to put this in here for this session. If you are having a hard time, it looks like most of you are finding the chat box there. If you want to utilize the microphone here later in Jonathan's presentation and the raise hand feature to be able to ask questions, you sure can. If you feel comfortable having your camera on and want to be visible, you're able to do that as well. It's more fun talking to faces than dots, but understand that if you're not in a space where you have the ability to use a camera, have that camera option or anything, we totally understand. But if you want to come on camera, we'd love to have you. Here's how to do that. And with that, be mindful that we want to have some great community discussion here. And we know that we're all adults here, family members, and keeping it real here in our virtual living room conversation. We're here to help. We want your engagement in the chat, utilizing that microphone as well to be able to express any of questions you have or statements regarding the material and information we have for you today. And of course, and it looks like you're all doing a great job. You're all on mute for now while others are talking, so that way there's no distractions. So great job. You're all doing awesome so far. I love seeing that you have, let's see, we have Plano, we have Arlington, we have Dallas. So all right, Metroplex chiming in here in our session, and Richardson, yes, excellent. This evening in the chat, I'm going to place a link for an end of survey assessment. It's a very quick evaluation of what we provided you this evening, and hopefully that the information was great. We want your feedback, whatever that is. There's also the opportunity for you to share back with us what topics you would like to hear in the future as well. So be sure to click on that link when I provide it towards the end of the session and fill that out tonight to give your feedback. Friendly reminder for those of you who are members of our Maverick Parent and Family Association, we want you to be sure that you are maximizing your membership. That Maverick Family Portal is important for you to be able to obtain information for events like this, our Family Association updates, university updates, resources for your students, articles, academic calendar, all the things there. And where you hear it first is by accessing that portal and making sure that you are receiving our announcements and our newsletter. Also, you can follow us on social media, Instagram. Hopefully you're utilizing your membership card for some discounts at the bookstore. You can put in the chat if you're using that, say 10%, you can put that in there for your discount that you've been getting with your membership card. And another great benefit is, of course, that scholarship for our students. So members of the Maverick Parent and Family Association, your students can apply for our Maverick Parent and Family Association scholarship each semester. We are able, based on the membership and support of our families, we're able to award 3 scholarships each semester of $800 each through this process. It's an application that's very easy to complete for your student. There's no essay option, and literally we do a random drawing, pull out 3 random numbers from the applicants, and they are the ones who win the $800. And your student has the opportunity every semester that you are a current member, they have the opportunity to complete that application and be eligible whether they have won previously or not. So that is an amazing benefit. Those scholarships are due on Monday. Those applications are due on Monday, February 28th. So you want to get that done, have your student complete that application, and we will be awarding that scholarship at the Family Day on Saturday, April 2nd. So here are some important dates and deadlines. I'll be sure to send these out. But of course, right now, some important things. If your student is living on campus, they are doing their housing contract renewals for the next academic year. So you might want to check in with your student about that if they haven't shared that information with you yet. That is going on this week and next week. Next Thursday, we have another Mav Essentials Live, so be watching out for information on that one. The 28th is our scholarship deadline. We've got spring break, more Mav Essentials Live activities, and of course, Family Day on April 2nd. So those dates are also in the Mav Essentials portal for you to review at any time as well. And now for the big event, right, Jonathan? We are excited to have one of our, I'm going to say one of, I'm going to say our expert, our financial aid expert, and a very good friend of our department, Jonathan Rodriguez, and he is going to share, there's even shouting outside the hallway for you. And he is going to share with you some great information. This is where you need to ask your financial aid questions and get those out this evening. So Jonathan, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, let you take it away. Thanks for joining us.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, Tasha. So as Kelsey said, my name is John Rodriguez. I'm an associate director in the UTA Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships. I'm over the customer service and outreach portion of our department. So I'm going to be going over some information with you, some financial aid information, some financial aid 101. So 101. So, we know you won't be experts by the time of end of this presentation, but hopefully you take away some great information on how you can help your student help pay for college, maybe access some scholarship opportunities, apply for financial aid that maybe you didn't apply for before, and just kind of learn some tips on, how to apply, when to apply to access some of those funding. We do offer a lot of financial aid to students here at UTA. We process and offer about $500 million of financial aid total to all of our students each year in financial aid. We offer about $30 million in scholarships. There's a lot of money out there, and hopefully this presentation will help you find the answers that you have, and help you apply for some of that funding. I've worked at UTA for 20 years. I've worked since 2001. I was a part-time student. I graduated from UTA in 2005. And I worked part-time while I was a student in the financial aid office as a work study student. That's one of the programs I'll go over in my presentation. And then I got a career out of it, and I'm happy to be here. I love UTA. I love telling people the great things that UTA does and that we offer. So I'm glad that you all are here to learn a little bit more about financial aid. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know your time is valuable. So it'll be pretty informal. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. There's the raise your hand button at the top of your screen, the little smiley face with the hand. In the chat, go ahead and stop me at the end of that slide, and I'll be happy to answer the question. Or I'll be happy to Q&A at the end of the presentation and answer any questions that you all may have that I didn't cover in my presentation. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'll go ahead and get started. Glad that y'all can join us today. All right. So can y'all see my screen here?
Looks fabulous.
Good, great. So as I said, my name is John Rodriguez. I'm one of the associate directors. There's my direct email, so feel free to write it down. If you have any questions in the future, feel free to reach out to me via email. I'll be happy to get back with you as soon as I can and answer any questions that you may have. So my email is jonathanr@uta.edu. So feel free to jot that down. I'll also put it in the chat at the end, just in case you didn't have a pen on hand to write that email down. So we are here to help. So this is our contact information. So we're located on campus in the University Administration Building. That is on the west side of campus across the Cooper Street Bridge. We're in the same building that the Student Accounts Office is in, the Registrar's Office, the Admissions Office, the President's Office. There's a lot of offices in that building, but we're on the second floor. So we're open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, so don't hesitate to come over and visit us. We have public computers in our office, so if you want to fill out your FAFSA application in our office, feel free to come on in with your student and fill it out, and we'll have counselors on hand to help you if you have any questions, or if you just have any general questions, we can help you as well. There's our phone number and email to our specific department. So we have the financial aid office as well as the scholarship office in our office, and those are the direct phone numbers and emails. And then we're on social media, so feel free to share or feel free to follow us if you'd like. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We do a lot of great posts about helpful information. So if you want to follow us, feel free to follow us. And then our website's there at the bottom, where we have a lot of great information on the things I'm going to cover, as well as additional information. So I want to give a quick shout out to our Student Money Management Center. So this department is physically located in our office in the University Administration Building on the second floor. Technically, they're part of student accounts, but they're in our office. Just made sense. Students coming and applying for financial aid, they may have questions about how to manage their money while they're in college. So it's a great resource for students that a lot of students I find don't know about. So if your student has questions about how to budget money, maybe they get a big refund check with their financial aid at the beginning of the semester, and they need help budgeting that to make sure it lasts the whole semester, to help pay for their books and then food the rest of the semester, their rent, stuff like that. They do a lot of outreach, and they sit down with students to talk about their finances. So if they have any questions, that's their website, their phone number, as well as their email. They're also located, like I said, in the University Administration Building, and they're also on Twitter and Facebook, and it's a great resource for students that I don't think it's enough publicity on campus. So the first thing I'd like to go over is how to apply for financial aid. So the main application to apply for financial aid is the FAFSA application. That's the free application for federal student aid. So the first F in FAFSA is free, so never ever pay anyone to fill out your FAFSA application. It's free. There's plenty of resources out there, including our office, to help you fill it out each year. So don't ever pay anybody. But the FAFSA application is online. It's an online application. You'll fill it out every school year to apply for financial aid. And you'll go to studentaid.gov, and the website's there on the right, in order to complete the FAFSA each school year. You can also go to FAFSA.gov. They recently transitioned to studentaid.gov. If you go to FAFSA.gov, it'll redirect you to studentaid.gov. But I guess, they changed the website name to studentaid.gov because there's more than just the FAFSA application on the website. You can go on there, you can read about financial aid programs that the federal government offers, learn about loans, you can learn about repayment plans. There's a whole plethora of things that you can learn on that website, not just to complete your FAFSA application. Also, the student can log into the studentaid.gov website with their FSA ID and password, the one they use to complete the FAFSA, and they can look at their loan history. So if at any point, in school or after school, they want to know, I want to know how much I borrowed, and if I've paid it down, how much I have left, they can log into studentaid.gov. They can see all the federal loans they borrowed their whole career, as well as what if they've received federal Pell Grant as well. So there's a lot of great helpful information on that website. So as I said, it's the FAFSA application. So there's two applications available right now. There's a 21-22 FAFSA application and 22-23. So the difference is the 21-22 will apply a student for financial aid for this past summer 21, this past fall 21, and the current spring 22 semester. And then the 22-23 FAFSA that's also out will apply a student for financial aid for the upcoming 22-23 aid year, which includes the summer 22 semester, the fall 22 semester, and spring 23. So if you haven't completed the FAFSA application yet for this school year, make sure you do it, because your student may qualify for some financial aid to help them. But if they're going to be attending hopefully next year, make sure that if you haven't already, make sure as soon as possible complete the 22-23 FAFSA, so that way they'll apply for aid for the upcoming school year. So on the FAFSA application, you're going to list income information that could be 2 years old. So for instance, for the 22-23 FAFSA application, it's going to ask you for the student and parent income from 2020. So I know we're already in 2022, so a lot can change. So I'll go over here in a minute on how to report any changes in your finances since 2020. But the Federal Department of Education requires you to report income information that's 2 years prior to the application you're filling out. One of the main things I hope you take away from this is that you apply early every year. So the FAFSA application becomes available every October 1st. So this past October, 3 or 4 months ago, on October 1st, the 22-23 FAFSA application became available for you to complete and apply for financial aid for the next school year. So almost a year in advance, 9 to 12 months in advance, you can apply for financial aid. The reason that's important to apply early is because some of our state grant money, so the FAFSA application applies a student for, it's your one application that applies your student for federal money, so federal grants, federal loans, federal work study, as well as state grant money. So there's some grant money that's from the state of Texas that we use the FAFSA application to determine who's eligible and how much. So while federal money doesn't run out, so like federal loans, federal Pell Grant if you're eligible, that money doesn't run out. So even if you wait until August to apply for the fall, if you're eligible, then we will offer your student the federal Pell Grant and federal loans. The state grant money that we have is limited, so we get a limited amount of money in those state grant programs each year. And once we run out, we run out. So if you wait too late to apply, you may miss out on some free grant money from the state of Texas that if you waited too late, you missed out on it. So the priority date that the state of Texas says we need to prioritize our FAFSA applicants each year to prioritize that limited state grant money is January 15th. So every school year on October 1st, you have until January 15th, so this last month for the upcoming school year, to complete your FAFSA, turn in any verification documents we may request from you, which I'll go into in a minute, in order to get in the pipeline to possibly receive that state grant money if the student was eligible. So that's why it's important to apply early every year. So around Halloween, we know that, applying for financial aid, paying for school could be scary. So around Halloween, we tell students, make sure you're filling out the FAFSA application. So your eligibility is based on what's called an expected family contribution, or EFC number. So once you fill out the FAFSA application, you're going to report all the income information that it asks. And then the Federal Department of Education puts all that information, how many people are in your household, how much income you had, how much taxes you paid, what benefits you have, all the questions they ask you, into a very complicated formula, and then they send you and us in the financial aid office what's called an EFC number, or expected family contribution. And that's the index number that we use to see what type and how much financial aid the student qualifies for. So don't think of that EFC number as like a dollar amount on what the government expects you to contribute to your student's education to pay. It's more of an index number. So the lower that number, the more grant money the student would receive. So it's really just an index number. So examples of our state and institutional grant money that the FAFSA applies you for, in addition to that federal Pell Grant, would be like Mav grant. That's a grant that we offer from UTA because we're the UTA Mavericks. The TPEG grant, which is the Texas Public Education Grant, and then the Texas grant. So those are examples of state grant money that the FAFSA automatically applies the student for. And as I said, federal Pell Grant, federal loans don't run out. So even if you apply late, you could get those if you're eligible. So what is needed to complete the FAFSA? So you'll, yes.
Quick question while you were on those dates.
Okay.
We have one of our guests asking, what if we miss the January 15th deadline?
So good question. So still apply. So that doesn't mean that you 100% missed out on some of those state grant monies, state grant funds. It just means that we have to prioritize. So we may have enough money to award state grant money to those who are eligible, you know, let's say, and I'll just throw an arbitrary date out, maybe through February 20th or February 25th. It just depends on how much money we get this year to offer those state grant funds. So if you miss the January 15th deadline, just, you know, don't think, oh, it's too late, I'm not even going to try. Go ahead and apply, because like I said, there's grant money that doesn't run out, like federal Pell Grant money, as well as federal loans, and you might get some state grant money if you still have it available. So just because the January 15th deadline has passed, don't not apply. Definitely still complete your FAFSA application. So what is needed to complete the FAFSA? So if you've never completed the FAFSA before, so let's say you're going to apply for the upcoming school year. So your student's going to fill out the 22-23 FAFSA application. What they're going to ask for, like I said earlier, is 2020 income data. So what you would need is the student's 2020 tax return if the student filed a tax return separate than you. So like their 1040, as well as the student's W-2. And then you will need the parents' 2020 tax return or 1040, as well as the parents' W-2s. And then the student's FSA ID and the parent's FSA ID. So the FSA ID is the Federal Student Aid ID and password. So that's how you electronically sign your FAFSA application once you've completed it. So the student and the parent are going to have separate FSA IDs because they separately have to sign it once you're done. The student will also use their FSA ID if they decide to borrow federal direct loans. They'll electronically sign their master promissory note the first year they borrow federal loans. You know, signing electronically saying that they understand the terms of the loan, they understand it's a loan, they need to pay it back, and they promise to pay it back. So they'll use that FSA ID to sign their master promissory note as well. Now, if you're eligible when you fill out the FAFSA application, we recommend using what's called the IRS data retrieval tool. If you are eligible, it'll depend on how you filed your taxes. When you fill out the FAFSA, it'll tell you whether or not you're eligible to use the data retrieval tool. But if you are, we recommend you use it because that will autofill those those income tax information directly from the IRS. So you would log into the IRS website when you're in the FAFSA application at the point in time for you to do so. And then if you're eligible, you can give them permission to download your IRS information directly from the IRS and autofill those, you know, adjusted gross income fields on the FAFSA, income tax paid, anything that it's going to ask you from your tax returns. If you're eligible, use that, and that'll save you some time, save you, you know, less chance of you making a manual error entering that information. So if you are eligible, we recommend you using the data retrieval tool. So once you submit the FAFSA application, the Federal Department of Education is going to send your information, your students' information, your FAFSA application directly to our office. We download that every day. Usually takes 1 to 2 business days for us to get it once it's fully completed and submitted. 1 out of every 3 students, right now it's about 1 out of every 4, so it's actually less students getting selected now. But the U.S. Department of Education will let us know if the FAFSA application you submitted was selected for a process called verification. If you are selected, that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. A lot of times it's just a random process. And what that means is the Federal Department of Education is telling us what documents we need to collect to verify the information that's on the FAFSA application. So if you use a data retrieval tool, for instance, some examples of documents we may request from the student is a copy of their tax return, a copy of the parent's tax return, a verification of household form to verify who all's in your household. Those are just some examples. But if you use the IRS data retrieval tool, since that information is coming directly from the IRS when you fill out the FAFSA, we're not going to ask for a copy of your taxes because that's already been verified directly from the IRS. So that's another benefit of using the data retrieval tool. So if the student is selected for verification, once we get their FAFSA application, we will notify the student via their student email, so their UTA email address. We'll also mail them a letter in the mail. And this semester, we actually started sending out text messages. So they'll get it if after a couple of weeks they haven't turned in the documents we've requested, we will send them a text message just reminding them that they have some missing documents that they need to turn in. Verification can take several weeks depending on what time of the year you're turning them in. So that's another reason to apply early. So that way, if we ask for a copy of your taxes, you have time to collect that information, turn it into our office, and enough time for us to process it before your payments are due. So let's say you wait until August to complete the FAFSA for next year. If you're selected for verification, that could take a couple weeks, and your payment may come due before we can process that and offer your student financial aid. And then you may need to, make a payment or set up a payment plan through student accounts before your financial aid is processed. So another reason to apply early every year. So another big question we get from students and parents is who is independent? So when you fill out the FAFSA application, if the student is a dependent student, the FAFSA is going to ask the student to report parent information. So on the FAFSA application, one of the first sections is it's going to have some dependency questions to determine if the student is an independent or a dependent student. So these are the, I think, 9 questions it's going to ask. So if the student can answer yes to any of these questions on that section of the FAFSA, they'd be considered an independent student, and then they wouldn't have to list parent information. Their financial aid eligibility would be solely based on the student's information, the student income, student household size, etc. So the first one is if the student's 24 years of age. So for the upcoming 22-23 FAFSA application, it's going to ask if the student was born prior to January 1st, 1999. So if they're going to turn 24 this year, this calendar year, then they'd be independent. If the student is married, they're independent. If the student is a graduate level student, they're automatically independent. If they're currently serving on active duty or a veteran, they're independent. If the student has children or dependents that the student provides more than 50% of the support of that child or dependent, they could be independent. If at any time since they turned 13, were both of their parents deceased, were they in foster care, or were they a dependent or ward of the court, they could be independent. Or if they're an emancipated minor or someone other than their parent or step-parent has a legal guardianship of them, or if they're an unaccompanied youth who's homeless or at risk of being homeless. So if they can answer yes to any of those, then they would be considered independent. When we get their FAFSA, we may request some documents to verify that, depending on which one they select. So if they can't answer yes to one of those, even if the parent doesn't help them out financially, if they have a relationship with the student, they just don't provide for them financially, even if they're not living at home. As far as the Federal Department of Education is concerned, be it for their FAFSA application, the student's still considered a dependent student, and they have to list parent information on their FAFSA, and their financial aid eligibility will be based on parent information, including as well as the student information. So there are some circumstances where if a student can't answer yes to one of these dependency questions, but let's say there's a student who has no contact with their parents, they have a very difficult situation with their parents, there's abandonment issues, abuse in the family, stuff like that. Hopefully that's not the case since you're here getting some information about your student. So hopefully you have a good relationship with your student. But for students who don't, they could do a dependency change request with some supporting documentation and reference letters, and we could possibly change them to independent, even if they can't answer yes to those dependency questions. So if this happens, or students, other students that may be other friends of your student that are in these situations, definitely tell them to reach out to our office so we can discuss to see if this is an option. Because if the student can't fill out the FAFSA because they have no contact with their parents at all, then this is maybe an option for them to fill out as well. And they would turn in the form with the reference letters and stuff to our office, and we'd get reviewed by a counselor, and we would make the decision if we can classify them as an independent student. So the next thing I want to, a reminder is make sure that your student is checking their MyMav account. So if they're selected for verification, for instance, we're going to put those documents that we are requesting from there in their to-do list. So once they log into their MyMav account, on the left side, they should have a to-do list that's there in orange, circled in orange, and that's going to list any tasks or any documents that UTA is asking the student to turn in. So that could be, if they're new to UTA, that could be like transcripts that UTA is requesting. If we request a copy of the tax return or parent tax return, it's going to show up on that to-do list. So make sure that they're checking their MyMav, Make sure they check it often. Anytime they log into MyMav, make sure they just glance over that to-do list just to see if there's any missing documents. So, because we don't want them to submit a FAFSA, they don't see the email, they don't get the letter in the mail, and then it's been on their to-do list for a couple months, but they just haven't checked it. And they're like, oh, I now I'm seeing I need to turn it in. So just make sure they just check that, glance over just to see if they're missing any documents that they need to turn into our office or any department on campus. So whether or not you have financial aid, if let's say you don't apply for financial aid, or let's say that your student doesn't qualify for financial aid, maybe they only qualify for loans, the student doesn't want to borrow loans. There are tuition payment plan options through the student accounts office. So those aren't handled through our office, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. The student accounts office, who's right below us in the University Administration Building, handles tuition payment plans. You can go onto their website and look up the information about tuition payment plans. But there's two types of tuition payment plans. There's the information there currently for the spring semester. So there's one that's an installment plan and one that's an enrollment loan. So the installment plan breaks up the student's tuition payments into 3 separate payments. The first payment would be due February 1st. The second one would be due March 1st, and the third one would be due April 1st. One of the criteria with this is it requires at least a $500 down payment. If the student receives some type of financial aid that credited towards a tuition that was greater than $500, that would satisfy the down payment portion of that, and then it would just break up the rest of it in that installments if they had to sign up for an installment plan. The enrollment loan, the benefit of that is it doesn't require any down payment. It only requires a non-refundable $40 fee that they have to pay up front, and then it would break up their payments into 2 payments. So the first payment would be due March 1st, and the second payment would be due April 1st. So if you have any questions about payment plans, definitely reach out to our student accounts office. The 4th bullet point has their phone number, their email address, and then, like I said, they're on the 1st floor below us in the University Administration Building. So the next thing I'd like to go over is FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974, or like I said, FERPA for short. It protects the privacy and records access rights of current and former students. So since due to FERPA laws, if you as a parent came into the office without your student or called the department on campus, there's limited information that we can give you unless your student has given access, has told UTA to give access to you to ask questions about and get information about their account. So students can submit a request to UTA to allow the release of information to parents or legal guardians or other specified parties for UTA to talk about the student's account when they're not present. So that's handled through our Office of Registrars. So if you do want the ability, or if your student wants you to have the ability to talk about their account when they're not present, then they need to fill out this guest access form through the Office of Registrar. So that's the navigation there on the 3rd bullet point. That's a screenshot of the screen you'll see. And then I've highlighted the guest access instructional information for the student that will tell them how, when they log into MyMav, where to go to delegate access for you. Now, you won't have access to like add or drop classes or apply for financial aid or like accept their awards or anything in MyMav. What it'll give you like view only access where you can log in to view maybe how much their tuition payment is, how much aid they have. So it'll kind of be view only access, but the student can check off which departments they want to give access to their parent or to the specified party, and what that department specifically can talk about with them. So maybe they're like, oh, I want them to talk about, my tuition payments and through the student accounts, my charges, but I don't want to give them access to talk about financial aid. So that's all up to the student's choice. So if you want to talk to your student, if they haven't done it already, to see if they are willing to give you delegated access to view and talk about your account, that's the information and the steps in order to do that.
Hey, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Quick question from the chat.
Sure.
FERPA needs to be completed every school year or just once after the student enrolls?
So it should just be, they should just have to submit the form and everything once. They won't have to do it every year. So they can, if they want, let's say they fill it out and then 6 months or a year from now, they're like, well, I want to take that access away. The student has the right to take the access away once they've given the access. It's not, indefinite. The student has the ability to take that away as well. What normally happens is once you sign up, the student will enter in the email address of the parent or the specified party they want to give access to, and then that person will get an email from UTA with there'll be like a key, like a password kind of that you'll have. So when you contact the office, if you're, and then we'll, like, let's say for instance for financial aid, if you call our office and you're not the student, we'll ask for that password that you got or that pass key in your email. And as long as you provide that to us, then we know that that's you, and then we can talk about the student's account of the topics and stuff that they've given us permission to talk about with the parent. So here are some financial aid programs. So all of these, the FAFSA application automatically applies you for. So there's not separate applications for the student to apply for these financial aid programs. So one, like I said, we've gone over some of these. The federal Pell Grant, that's for undergraduate students. It's free money from the federal government if they're eligible based on their FAFSA. The state and institutional grants, like I said, those are limited. The federal direct loans, so there are two types of federal direct loans that the FAFSA application automatically applies a student for. So the first one is subsidized loans. So these are going to be for lower income students with the lower EFC number. That's that index number I talked about. The benefit of the subsidized loan is that one is interest free while the student is in school. So both the federal direct subsidized loan and federal direct unsubsidized loan, as long as the student is enrolled in school at least half time, so as an undergrad student, it's at least 6 hours each semester, they're not required to make any payments on their federal direct loans while they're in school. Their payments would begin 6 months after they graduate or 6 months after they drop below half-time in school. The difference between these loans are the subsidized loan does not collect interest while the student's in school. So as long as the student is enrolled in school at least half-time, the subsidized loan is not collecting any interest at that time. It would start collecting interest 6 months after the student graduates or 6 months after they drop out of school or drop below half-time in school. The unsubsidized loan, while the student doesn't pay it while they're in school, or they don't have to, they can if they want to, that one collects interest while the student is in school. So if they are offered both, definitely accept the subsidized loan first. And if they still need some money to go to school, they can accept the unsubsidized loan as well. And then Federal Work Study is the other program that I talked about earlier. And I think my next slide will go more in detail on that program. So Federal Work Study program, like I said, I utilized the Federal Work Study program when I was a student at UTA. I worked part-time in the financial aid office. It's a great opportunity to gain work experience while you're going to school. It's only a part-time job. UTA and the federal government knows they're student first. So the max they can work is 19 hours a week. And they can apply for jobs via the Handshake website. There it is on the fourth bullet point. And they can view all jobs that are available on campus through UTA via the joinhandshake.com website. Some of them will be work study jobs. Some of them may be non-work study jobs. So not all jobs on campus are work study jobs. But like I said, the work study, the FAFSA will automatically apply the student for work study and will offer it to them if they're eligible. And it's based on that EFC index number that we talked about earlier. Undergrad and graduate students are eligible for work study if they're eligible based on the FAFSA. And again, it's an opportunity to find a work study job on campus. There are some off-campus work study jobs, but a majority of them are on campus. Like I said, they can work up to 19 hours a week if the job needs them for 19 hours a week. And when we offer the student work study on their award notification, it'll have a dollar amount. So for instance, the maximum this year was $2,000 per semester. That's not any upfront money they're not going to get a $2,000 check or a $2,000 payment that goes toward their tuition at the beginning of the semester. Think of that as potential money that the student could earn up to $2,000 if they found a job on campus and worked and earned enough to get that $2,000. They get paid directly as a paycheck every 2 weeks, and the money they get paid with just comes from that fund. And they can use that for any living expenses. They can use it to pay their tuition, food, housing, books, whatever the student needs to go to school that semester. And then once they accept their work study and they do find a job, on the right, that's a screenshot in their MyMav under the financial aid tile. Well, where they will find the work study eligibility form that they'll print off and give to their employer on campus once they've been hired, and that tells the employer that they're eligible for work study and that how much they were awarded and how much they can earn that semester as a maximum.
All right, Jonathan, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
If you could clarify for the financial aid programs that you're mentioning, is that part of the FAFSA application, or do they need to apply for each grant, loan, and work study separately?
Right, good question. So all the financial aid programs here on the screen, the FAFSA is one application that automatically applies them for all of those. So there's not separate applications for these. If the student is eligible for a federal Pell Grant, a state grant, and we have money left for state grants or institutional grants, and a federal loan, a work study will automatically offer those programs to the student once we get their FAFSA and determine what they're eligible for and what we have available. Good question. So another reminder is there are enrollment requirements for the specific financial aid programs that the student accepts. So in general, grants are reduced based on the number of credit hours. So if as an undergraduate student, full-time is 12 or more credit hours each semester, three-quarter time would be 9 to 11 hours, half-time would be 6 hours to 8 hours each semester, and then anything under 6 would be less than half-time. So if the student was offered a grant, then that grant is going to be reduced based on the number of credit hours. So if the student's full-time, then they'll get the full amount of grant that was offered to them. If they're less than full-time, it'll be adjusted, 75% for three-quarter time, 50% for half-time, and 25% for less than half-time. Some of the grant programs like state grants require at least half-time. If the student's eligible for Pell Grant, they should be eligible for at least a small amount of it, even if they're only taking one class, depends on their eligibility. Student loans do require at least half-time to be eligible for a loan disbursement. So that means at least 6 credit hours for that semester. So if a student accepts a loan, then just keep in mind they have to be in at least 6 hours to receive that loan disbursement for that semester. Most scholarships do require at least full-time enrollment unless it's their graduating semester and they don't need full-time. They don't need 12 hours to graduate. There are some exceptions and appeal that they can do. But in general, scholarships do require at least full-time enrollment to receive those funds. You can go onto our website there, the navigation at the bottom, and there's our financial aid disbursement page. It'll go over not only enrollment requirements like the chart on the right, but also other common reasons why maybe financial aid disbursement didn't disperse, some other common things that may, they may not have done a promissory note for their loan, for instance, stuff like that, about financial aid disbursements in general. So when we're more talking about federal loans, there are annual and lifetime limits that the student can borrow in federal direct loans. So as a student progresses through their career at UTA or in college, the amount of federal direct loans they could borrow increases each year. So for instance, as dependent students, they could borrow their first year when they're freshmen, they could borrow up to $5,500 total in federal direct loans. That's a combination of subsidized and unsubsidized. Their second year, once they become a sophomore, they could borrow $6,500, and then their third and fourth year, their junior, senior year, they can borrow up to $7,500 per year in federal direct subsidized and unsub, the combination of those. If they're an independent student, so again, if they're 24, married, if they meet those independent questions or dependency questions, they can actually borrow more money as an independent student. So their first year would be $9,500, and then second year $10,500, $12,500 per year, their junior or senior. So as a student progresses, they can borrow more money if they want to. Again, we preach be responsible loan borrowers, only borrow what you need, but the maximums increase as they progress through their career at UTA. Then as a graduate student, those go even higher. They can borrow $20,500 per year in federal direct unsubsidized loans. They also have lifetime limits. So lifetime as a student in the United States, a dependent student can borrow $31,000 total in federal direct loans. Then once they become an independent student, that $31,000 limit increases to $57,500 as an undergraduate student. And then once they're a graduate student, that limit increases even more to $138,500. Hopefully, your student's not going to borrow this much money, but there are maximums that they could borrow if they do need those funds. If you notice, as a dependent student, the federal direct loan limits per year are, lower than an independent student. The federal government does say that if a parent, and I'll go over the federal Parent Plus loan here in a minute, the federal government says that if the student's a dependent student and they borrow the federal direct loans, but they need more money, if the parent tries to apply for a federal Parent Plus loan through the Federal Department of Education, and they're denied for that loan, so if the parent tried to borrow some money for the student to help them with their education costs through the federal government, but they're denied based on their credit or whatever the denial reason is, we can increase the student's loans to the independent level. So that is an option if you think if the student does need to borrow some more federal direct loans and they're a dependent student, and you think you might be denied for a federal Parent Plus loan through the government, and you're denied, we can increase the student's loan so they could borrow some more money. So that is an additional option for some more loan money for the student as well. And I'll go more into detail on what the PLUS loan is here in a minute. So as I said earlier, when you fill out the FAFSA application, you're going to report income information that could be 2 years old, and a lot can change in 2 years, especially the last 2 years of the pandemic, but just any year. So if something has changed, you're going to report that income information and asked on the FAFSA. But once we get your FAFSA, you could report that change in financial circumstance directly to our office and let us know what that is with some supporting documentation, and that might change what the student's eligible for. So that's called a special circumstance. And there's a special circumstance form on our website. The navigation's at the bottom. The screenshot's an example of what the form looks like. But examples may be separation or divorce. So maybe when you fill out the FAFSA with your student initially, maybe you were married, maybe the student's parents were married. But let's say come July, hopefully this doesn't happen, but maybe, the parents split up, maybe they're divorced or separated, and there's only one income helping the student now. So the student can report that change in circumstance to our office, and then instead of us basing their eligibility on the financial situation of both parents, if they're divorced or separated now, we can change that and only factor, we can take into consideration only one parent's income instead of both of them. Another example may be loss of job or income. So maybe in 2020, when you fill out the FAFSA and reported that 2020 income, you were making decent money, you had a full-time job, but maybe now you lost your job, whether it's the student or the parent, or you have a different job, you're making less money, you're working less hours, less income's coming in, you can report that to our office as well. Or if there's a death in the family, maybe one of the parents unfortunately passed away, we can take that parent's income out of the financial aid equation as well. Or if there's a lot of extenuating medical expenses, so maybe you're paying a lot of out-of-pocket medical expenses this year that insurance does not cover, we can take any paid medical expenses you've already paid into consideration, and that possibly could make the student eligible for additional aid. For as an example, maybe when you fill out the FAFSA, you reported 2020 income, and maybe the student was only eligible for loans based on that. But since then, maybe one parent or both parents lost their job, they're not making as much money, and they do a special circumstance. Maybe after the special circumstances process, maybe now they're eligible for a federal Pell Grant. We can add that if they're eligible. So if you think this might apply to you and the student, make sure you reach out to our office. We can discuss that, reach out to me to see if that may be something you can apply for and maybe give your student a little bit more financial resources to pay for their college. So another question is there financial aid options for undocumented or DACA students? So there is. We do offer financial aid to our DACA or undocumented students. It's a paper TASFA application. So if your student falls in this category, there is some state grant money if they're eligible via the TASFA application, which is the Texas application for state financial aid. So to complete the FAFSA, you have to be a U.S. citizen, the student a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or an eligible non-citizen, like if they're here on an asylum, stuff like that. But if they're a Texas resident, but if they graduated like from a Texas high school, lived in Texas for 3 years leading up to high school graduation, and they're classified as a Texas resident for tuition purposes, like our undocumented or DACA students, they possibly could get some state grant money via the TASFA application. This is even more important. The January 15th deadline is even more important for this population, since they're only eligible for state grants, not federal grants due to their status. That's the limited funding, so we could run out of those pretty quick. So if this does apply to your student, make sure they're completing the TASFA application in October, especially when it comes out the same time that FAFSA comes available. And then that might, they may be eligible for some state grant money. If you could do a FAFSA application, don't do the TASFA. It's just either or. So don't do the TASFA if you are eligible to complete a FAFSA, if the student can do a FAFSA. They can also apply for scholarships via the Mav Scholarship, which I'll go into here in a minute, and then apply for a college access loan, which is a loan through the state of Texas. That's a loan that a DACA or undocumented student can apply for as well. We also have a resources for Dreamer page at the bottom there through our Student Affairs office that has some other resources for this population of students, not only financial aid resources, but like legal resources, stuff like that. So let's say you applied for financial aid, the student got a financial aid award notification, and let's say it's not enough. Maybe you need some additional aid to help pay for college. So there are some additional loan options, both for the parent and the student. So I want to go over real quick on a couple of those options. As I said earlier, there is a federal Parent Plus loan that a dependent student's parent can apply for to help fund their student's education. So this is a loan through the Federal Department of Education. It is a loan in the parent's name, so the parent would be required to pay it back. And then they would do the application on the studentaid.gov website. And then it is based on the parent's credit score. Payments would begin once it's dispersed. There are some options if you're not able to pay while the student's in school. You may be eligible for a deferment as well. And the current interest rate is 6.28%. That changes every July, like the federal subsidized and unsubsidized loan interest rates. But that is an option if you are a parent of a dependent student and are willing to borrow money for them in your name to help pay for their education. That's an option as well. And then again, as I said earlier, if you apply for the Parent Plus loan but you're denied, we can increase the students' federal loans because the government says you tried to help them out but weren't eligible, and they'll allow them to borrow up to the independent level of loans. Once a student's a graduate student, there is a federal Grad Plus loan, which the federal Graduate Plus loan is for graduate students who are independent. So that would be in the student's name. But if your student is a dependent undergrad, it would be the Plus loan. Grad Plus loan is for graduate level students. That's an option once they're a grad student. So the other option, as I mentioned earlier, is the College Access Loan. This is available to any Texas resident who's going to college. This is through the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. It's an organization through the state of Texas that handles a lot of the state grant programs in Texas. It's available to undergraduate and graduate students. It's based on the student's credit or a cosigner's credit. So maybe your student needs some additional loan funds to go to school and you're not willing to take out a loan for them in the Plus loan, but maybe you're willing to cosign for them. A College Access Loan is a great loan to borrow, and it's in the student's name if they're a Texas resident. And has a pretty low interest rate, too. It's 3.75% this year, and that changes every July 1st as well. That's an option as well for Texas residents. And then the last option would be a private loan through a bank of the student's choice. And those criteria and interest rates will differ based on the individual bank. We do have something called the Fast Choice Lender List on our website, on our loans page, that will have a database of private loans that the student can browse if they want to look into a private loan as well. So I'm going to go over real quick the satisfactory academic progress policy. So just as a reminder that if a student is receiving financial aid through us, there are certain academic requirements that the student needs to meet in order to continue to be eligible each school year for their financial aid. So you can look more specifically at our SAP policy on our website there at the top. But essentially, there's 3 components of our SAP policy. At the end of every spring semester ends the aid year, and we'll review to see anyone who's applying for financial aid or receiving financial aid if they met this SAP policy. And if they didn't, we would send them a letter and an email letting them know that they didn't meet the requirements and that in order to receive aid the upcoming year, the next school year, they need to do an appeal explaining what happened, why they maybe failed classes, why maybe they dropped classes, stuff like that. So there's 3 components. One is a cumulative GPA. So there's a minimum GPA they have to meet depending on if they're a first, second, third, or fourth year student. The other one is cumulative pace of program progression or completion percentage. So they have to successfully complete at least 67% of all attempted credit hours in order to meet this component each year. And then max time frame is if, let's say, maybe they've been in school 5-6 years, they haven't graduated. They've attempted a lot of credit hours, but they haven't graduated yet. At a certain point, they have to do an appeal just stating why it's taken them a little longer to graduate and how much longer they may have to graduate. So if your student does receive this letter, it's not the end of the world. We do tell them in the letter and the email how they can submit an appeal in order to regain their eligibility for financial aid. So if your student is talking about dropping a class, make sure they reach out to our office first because there may be some negative ramifications both for the current year's financial aid as well as the future year's financial aid, like the SAP policy, like I said. So if they're thinking about dropping a class, just have them either call us, email us, or come into our office to discuss what may happen if they drop 1 class, 2, whatever their number of classes they're thinking about dropping. Because if depending on when they drop, if they drop early in the semester, we may have to reduce some grant money that they may have gotten because they maybe are below full time now. Or if they completely withdraw, we understand things can happen. Maybe they got sick or a family member got sick they had to take care of and they weren't able to attend school for a week and they're way behind and they just need to completely withdraw from the semester. If they completely withdraw from all their classes that semester, they may end up owing some of their financial aid back since that was used to pay to go to school and they're no longer enrolled. So, excuse me. Just keep in mind that if your student mentions maybe dropping a class, make sure they reach out to us so we can discuss what those ramifications might be. If your student did receive a merit-based scholarship, make sure that they are fully aware of what the renewal requirements are. If you go onto our scholarship website, which is uta.edu/scholarships, on the left side, you'll see policies and then renewal requirements. And then it'll, on the right, it'll give you a chart on what the renewal requirements are for those specific merit-based scholarships. So if they receive a scholarship as an incoming freshman student or a transfer student, it will come with a number of credit hours they have to meet each year and complete, as well as a minimum GPA in order to renew that each school year. So just make sure that they're aware of that. Like the SAP policy, there is an appeal process if they don't meet those, and that'll just depend on the committee once it goes to them. If they, let's say they only completed, let's say 20 hours that school year, and they needed to complete 30, or maybe their GPA is a 2.5, but they needed a 3.0, they can submit an appeal through the scholarship office and possibly maybe get an exception for 1 year to get it, but that'll be handled on a case-by-case basis. So as a UTA student, we do have a Mav Scholar Shop, which is a database that houses all of our UTA scholarships. We offered about $6 million this year in additional scholarship opportunities, scholarship applications, scholarship dollars this year. So, and we keep adding more and more scholarship dollars to that each school year. So your student could log into the Mav Scholar Shop, and here is where they can find it. So when they go into the scholarship homepage on the left side at the bottom, they'll see the link to log into the Mav Scholar Shop. They're going to log in with their net ID and their password, and then they are going to log in and view all the scholarship opportunities available at that time. And we update that frequently. So we do update that as we get additional scholarships from different departments, different organizations on campus. Our scholarship office may get some dollars that we create new scholarship opportunities. And each of the scholarships on there will have individual applications. So let's say the student logs in and sees five scholarships that they meet the minimum requirements for. They'll submit 5 different applications through the Mav Scholar Shop, and then that'll go to whatever committee is deciding who gets a scholarship, and then they'll contact them after the deadline to see who was awarded that scholarship. But check that frequently. Every month we tell students to log in because there may be something new in next month that may be available that they can apply for. The other option is outside scholarship. So there is an outside scholarship flyer on our website there. There's a navigation. We do update this frequently as well, but these are going to be organizations and companies that we process scholarships for our students each year, so they're not going to be scammed. We've already vetted them. We've already worked with them closely in the past. We have an English and a Spanish version of the flyer, and like I said, we update this frequently, and they can look at scholarship opportunities outside of UTA that possibly they can qualify for some money as well. So here, before I wrap up and move on to Q&A, if anyone has any questions, here's our contact information again. So don't hesitate, you or your student, don't hesitate to reach out to our office if you have any questions. There's no dumb question, only dumb question is the one that's not asked, so don't hesitate to reach out. And then I'll also put my direct email in the chat here, and so you can feel free to message me if you have any questions as well. But I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Appreciate your time. I know we've gone long, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have that I didn't answer already that were in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that information, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
I know I learned a lot.
Okay, great.
And of
I
course,
put my email in the chat.
please drop it in the chat. And if you don't have access to the chat and you want to come onto the microphone, you can definitely do that as well. We'd love to hear from you. Or maybe it's a statement. You don't have to have a question. If you just want to share something, you can do that too.
And you, like I said, you may think of something later, and just feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to respond to you tomorrow with any answers that I can give you as well. And I went over a lot of information, so I'm sure they're just soaking it all in.
I'm going to do my best to also post this video in the Mav family portal so that they can go back and pause and watch, maybe have a family meeting about it if they need to have a good understanding of those processes.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, Sheila, I can answer that question about Family Day, Saturday, April 2nd. That one is going to be just a 1 day. So Parent Family Weekend in October is multiple days. Family Day in April, Saturday, April 2nd. Mark your calendar for that. We are looking forward to providing a fun day with some service, with some athletic events that you can take advantage of, a great picnic, some exciting and fun ways for you to spend the day with your Maverick here on campus. I'm really, really excited about it. So I hope y'all are too, and that you save the date for that. Saturday, April 2nd. There's no cost to attend Family Day. So We will have an RSVP form that you can fill out to let us know that you're coming so we can plan ahead, but there is not a fee to attend Family Day in April on the 2nd. Hope to see you there, all of you. Anyone else? Thanks, Karen, for your comment. Sheila has a question about a special circumstance form, so we'll pause to get that question from her.
Okay, so it looks like Sheila had asked if you do a special circumstance form and is deemed that your status has changed, does that then affect your future year's benefits? So if I understand your question correctly, if your current financial situation changes, will that affect your student's future year's financial aid eligibility, if I understand you correctly? So yeah, so if you fill out the current 22-23 FAFSA application, you report 2020 income data, and then, let's say we get the information, we offer the student financial aid package based on that. And then if you've had a change in financial circumstance and your financial situation has changed, you're making less money or whatever the circumstance may be, then we would update the financial aid award notification and package for the student. And if they're eligible for any additional grant money, then we would offer that to them once you've submitted those documents. So it says, yeah, each year's form is info from 2 years ago. Right. So the FAFSA, every year fill it out will be, you're going to report on the FAFSA 2 years prior to that year. So when you fill out the special circumstance, that'll be what your circumstance is at the time of you doing the special circumstance. So if that's changed, then that's when you would report it to our office. But it would be for the year that you're submitting it. So if you submitted it now, we would project what your estimated income would be for 2022. And then if that's a lot less than it was in 2020 on the FAFSA, we would just update that income information for the student with that documentation to update to include just 2022 income. And then that may affect their eligibility and maybe give them some more grant money that they may not have had prior based on the old 2020 outdated information. Hopefully that made sense.
Great question. I love it. This group has been very interactive.
That's great. Yeah, I do a lot of these, and some of them it's just crickets. So yeah, I'm happy to answer questions and glad that y'all have questions. That's shows.
Hi, this is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
I have some question. You had mentioned that sometimes IRS will ask you to verify a few more things based on the FAFSA application. Is there a list of things that are you looking for? One of the reason I ask is that since December, every time one of my daughters is being asked a new form, a different form, and it's frustrating because you have to go search, and and by now we thought we would have already been done with the process. But is there like a list of things that I could have to prepare, because my daughter's going again tomorrow to the financial department to turn in another document. So
Sure.
can we just have something that I do my little checklist and just send it off to her with her, so just to make sure that we're not going back and forth with it?
Sure. Now, so I can answer that question. So the general answer is yes, we do have a forms page on our website with all the verification forms that we might request from a student. I don't recommend you just filling out all the forms and submitting them. If we're not requesting the form from the student, I wouldn't submit it, because if the student submits it, then we have to verify it, and that may delay the process. It is, and I'm sorry if we've requested additional documents from you or your student, but what happens is if we request, let's say the taxes, for instance, and I don't know the individual circumstance that you have, but maybe after us reviewing the taxes, maybe that triggers something else that we have to verify, because maybe there's some conflicting information on something else. So we may follow up with some additional forms that we initially didn't request. So really that's on a case-by-case basis. So you could look at our verification forms page on our website. But again, I wouldn't recommend just filling all of them out and submitting them to our office, because that may delay the process even more. If you're turning in documents we didn't request, if they submit it to us, we have to, based on federal policy, we have to process those and verify those, and that may delay it even more. But if you want, you can ask for me. If you or your student comes into the office, I should be there tomorrow. If I think you said that you were coming tomorrow, I'd be happy to sit down with her or you or both and discuss the forms that we're requesting and what, potentially we may request after that. I just have to look at her individual account.
Yeah, we have a special family circumstance too.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll email you directly to just explain to you.
Sure.
And yeah, that I don't have anything that will validate that special family circumstance. But I'll explain to you via email. So you could review and just guide us on that, because based on that,
Sure.
I had filed as separated. And so now that we're being questioned about that. So because legally it's not a divorce. So but yeah, I'll share a little bit more via email.
Yeah, if you want, sure. If you want to email me, I'd be happy to review it tomorrow morning, and I can get back with you tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. No problem.
Excellent. All right. So I have dropped in the chat. I'm going to do it one more time because I really want to hear back from all of you who were participating in tonight's Mav Essentials Live. This is a program that we want to continue to do. We also want to make sure that what we're providing is beneficial for all of our families. I can tell by your interaction and all your questions today that this one was a very beneficial program for y'all to have. So we want to hear from you for your feedback, for some ideas on anything in the future, and just be able to connect with you. If you cannot access the link, then you can email me at parents@uta.edu and say that you were at this session this evening and you would like to complete the feedback form. Again, you can email us at parents, parents@uta.edu. And of course, you can email us anytime at that email address if you have any questions and you need help accessing anything. I chatted with Sheila this morning earlier about this event and some other things going on. So she was asking questions in that email and made it here tonight. If you prefer talking to us on the phone, you can also give us a call. And that number, I have too many phone numbers. That one's 817-272-2128. You can reach us anytime on our family warm line. So if it's not me that answers, it'll be another staff member like Peter or any of our student liaisons. We have access to that to be able to answer your questions. Of course, we're here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and we'll respond to any voice messages and emails as they come in. So hopefully we will see you next week also, same time at 6 o'clock for Mav Essentials Live on a new topic. Very excited about having our friends from the Department of Multicultural Affairs presenting that one next week. So next Thursday at 6 o'clock, we'll have another Mav Essentials Live program. I'll put that information in the portal for all of you to access. So thanks again, everyone, for being here this evening for our first spring Mav Essentials Live financial aid program. Thank you, Jonathan, for your support and hanging out with us all week long, helping students with their FAFSA and additional financial aid needs. And if y'all have questions, please reach out to Jonathan or myself. We're happy to assist you. Y'all have a great evening, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
Kelsey?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I just did this is Dawn Connor. I just did submitted